Welcome everyone to CDO Magazine series of one-on-one interviews with CDOs, data leaders, and key influencers. I'm your host, Robert Lutton, Vice President of Sandhill Consultants, and I'm coming to you today from Toronto, Canada, working on behalf of the CDO Magazine. So welcome, Katie. Welcome, Zach.
Thank you for having us.
If maybe you can talk just a moment about how you've achieved what I perceive as this critical core element within your organization, and can you talk that a little bit more about and how does the management see that, for example? Do they see that value that you've been able to deliver that, and do they know that it comes from the data management investments you've made over time with your team and technology and things like that?
We're very fortunate to be, the leadership that I've got has always, my VP, with up through HR, and then also within Navy Federal senior leadership, they get it. And but I think
that is great.
One of the things that we've got is Katie touched on this, is that we're not shareholder owned, and so we, because we are not for profit and member owned, entity. We can take a long game sometimes that not all organizations, a lot of organizations have those pressures of of what's my share price. And so
quarterly results. I tell you, it's the worst thing. I'm a shareholder in several corporations, but it sometimes is the worst thing that you could do because you're driven by an artificial activity, whereas you're not serving the actual member or the customer properly. I get it, but I truly think, Zach, that what you've got there and how you built it is definitely making your delivery of your outputs and results much more attainable because you got that framework. So
I think the real benefit of what we've been able to do is over the years, we've got some HR data, but we've also got some non-HR data like space planning, and like there's some other data points that we get that we can bring into one shop, and then we can make the connections between data. And so that's where you now start seeing that exponential, sort of growth of opportunities, because it's not just, we're not just answering HR questions anymore. It's we're able to really answer the questions that the business wants. But again, we had to show that we're just as careful, even though we're only in HR,
right?
We're doing the same things you're doing. So enterprise data governance is a big piece, so that we can show that it's not, they're not lesser standards in HR. There's not lesser standards in these other areas.
Right.
And so having an enterprise strategy, allows us to be able to say we can mix up HR with non-HR data in a safe and secure way that complies with all standards. And now you can really, that's where the really rich insights and data-driven decisions make, when you're not just, when the data's not compartmentalized, because we've created the infrastructure that's able to mix those. And I think that's the thing. And again, it's tough to get visionary, like people that the senior leaders, because it's not cheap. It's expensive in dollars and time, obviously time as well.
It is so pleasing to hear that the Navy Federal Credit Union senior management team gets it and gets that, you got to spend it to make sure that you can get these benefits out of it. Coming back to the more kind of mundane topics, I hate to say that, but it's the traditional stuff, that the basic block and tackle that has to be done. Katie, I'm going to come back to you and say, is there anything that you can talk to, without giving away trade secrets or whatever, on what you believe is the best approach to data governance that can ensure the data quality and perhaps the security? Because both, Zach had mentioned, the quality of data, the security of data, the privacy of the data. Is there a way that you would espouse approach to data governance to ensure that, and especially, if you can talk to what you do at the credit union, and if not, in generic terms is fine.
Okay, so I came into this really fortunate situation, as you heard from Zach, where I have leadership that understands data governance and has invested heavily into data, and they are incredibly supportive. And my colleagues understand data governance. They have invested in data literacy and welcome change. So that makes trying to set up data governance and do this kind of thing much easier, because that's like a fast forward button.
Right.
So to drive change at Navy Federal, I needed to understand our mission and culture, which Zach told me in our interview. And I was like, oh, this is wonderful. It made like kind of thinking through, how am I going to plan this out? How am I going to go in and make a change? And then I found out our brilliant HR analytics team had done most of the things I honestly had planned to do as like my first couple of years. And I was like, wow.
Yeah, well,
like,
you're ahead of the curve, right? Well done. Well, you guys are, it's just so exciting to hear the fact that you're way ahead of the curve, that you come in and going, okay, yeah, we can jumpstart like several years down the line. That's great. Continue, Katie. This is great. So what do you do then?
So when you have HR analytics has already tested like these governance strategies within an area in Navy Federal that I know work, it works with our environments, as Zach was alluding to, they built such good controls, they were able to monitor the people controlling them, monitoring the controls of the servers. So it made for a really great space to come into. And then really what I need to do next is take these great best practices they put in place and put them in place across the entirety of HR. And as enterprise data governance has more best practices, because data governance is really an emerging field within the entirety of all enterprises, making sure we keep moving or exceeding the standards. And I came into a situation where we're implementing some really incredible software too. So I try to focus on what is changing and making sure that as things are being changed, I am working with the change and those resources and getting the controls in place to work with the processes. That is so critical because it's not a separate, effort at that point. It is part of the process. That to me is how you drive really effective change.
And so if I hear you correctly, you're actually going from data governance to enterprise data governance across the entire, all the business. Well, I know that you're in HR, so how do you connect with the other business units?
So we have an enterprise data governance team that really sets, here is the policy overall for the entirety of Navy Federal. Then I am one of the business unit data stewards. I make sure that we are in compliance with that policy and many of the other area policies regarding record retention, and that we have a strategy to really stay in compliance, meet our needs as HR, and implement these as part of our processes.
And are you dotted lined up to the enterprise data governance? Because it sounds like it's like a federated approach to governance and in your business unit and the enterprise data governance team.
I would say I have a couple of dotted lines. So yes, I work with many different areas and leaders. So I work with them, but I report up through Zach and Susan, who is an incredible thought leader and data leader in HR. I actually work within HR.
It's interesting when individuals have multiple dotted lines, but thank you for that. I'm wondering,
can I add to that, Robert?
Yes, please go ahead, Zach. Yeah,
and I think it's real, with having that enterprise structure, but the embedded, like, Katie's that liaison, but also, so she's tasked with, being in the weeds and in touch with all the enterprise principles. And obviously the enterprise is making sure they're looking outward as well. Like, what are the best practices? What's the rest of the world and the industry doing with, data governance? And so she's able to kind of be that. She speaks HR. She knows the people in HR because she's embedded within the business area. And then there's other HR, or there's other business data stewards in, real estate lending, the finance department and things. And so they're very close to the business. And so they understand the quirks of our data, and that is one of the challenges of being in a big, a bigger organization too, is you have, people start getting specialized in things. And so that was one of Katie's very early, one that was diagnosis, but then also, solutions, was realizing that people kept asking getting asked the same question from 5 different things, and they were like, hey, I need to know about I need to do a risk assessment of each application that HR uses. And so they're going through like reputational risk and and all the different financial risks and all the different risks and then you're like, but then 2 weeks later somebody's asking me to do map the data security risks of it, and you're like, couldn't we do all this at once? And like, what are all the questions anybody asks about our applications? And so Katie said, hey, let's see if we can do this, because people keep asking similar questions, and so let's try to gather all the questions anybody asks about an application, right, put them in one place. So whenever we go through either a contract, a renewal with an application that we may have, or we're procuring a new application, we know what we want to ask. We've got a solid list, and so then it really speeds things up.
What a phenomenal job that you're doing. So on behalf of the CDO Magazine, I'd like to thank you both for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.